Australia has joined allies warning Houthi rebels to stop attacks on cargo ships in the Red Sea. The crisis risks fueling price pressures as some ships decide to skip the region entirely. Joining me live is ANZ senior economist Adelaide Timbrell. Thanks so much for your time, Adelaide. Yesterday we spoke to Brendan Rinn from KPMG, who thinks there won't be much inflationary effects for Australia because of the disruption we're seeing in the Red Sea at the moment, with Houthi rockets being fired at cargo ships. So they are being diverted through much longer and more expensive routes. He thinks that it's temporary and won't impact too much on Australia. What's your opinion on whether we could see price spikes because of this shipping route being affected by the conflict?
Look, I broadly agree. I think when we think about inflation as a total situation, including all of the different goods and services that come into that measure, it's going to have a relatively small effect. There's going to be some goods, though, that if they do rely on that shipping area are going to see price rises. But again, those price rises will be temporary. The thing about inflation, the kind of inflation that the Reserve Bank is the most worried about and is going to act on is inflation that is permanent, or inflation that needs action in order to be reversed. Something like this, though, unless we see the shipping lanes closed permanently, is not going to have the kind of effect that will impact interest rates. I think it will have a small effect on, Australia's inflation on a temporary basis for the period of time where those ships are being diverted, because, as you say, it becomes more expensive. We know oil prices are already high. We know that that's something that's going to exacerbate those costs, but it's only going to be for a very limited number of goods for a very limited amount of time.
Well, that is good news, but another one of our top stories this morning is that developers in Australia are sceptical they can reach the government's targets of building 170,000 homes by 2027 because of rising material costs and labour shortages. This is a massive problem, the housing crisis in Australia. In terms of labour costs and building materials, is there any sign that that may start easing and developers can have an easier time in getting on and building these homes?
This is a really tricky one. I think there's a lot of variables out in the economy right now that are against developers building. Funding costs are higher, building times are longer, as you say, labour and building costs are higher. And while housing prices are rising, they're not actually rising to the extent that they need to for those profits to look reasonable to a lot of developers. So we are going to see, as a result of this, some developers will still build, but there'll be this portion of developers that don't think the profits are high enough, that don't build as much as they usually would, and that's going to lead to less housing supply. In a time of really strong population growth, and at a time where the average person is looking for more house because of working from home for the office sector, this is something that really exacerbates the existing undersupply we have in housing in Australia. We think at ANZ Research, our forecast is that housing prices will rise around 6% this year. And the main reason for that is undersupply. Yes, we do think there'll be a rate cut towards the end of the year that helps borrowing capacity. Yes, we do think that tax cuts in the second half of the year and wage growth will also help borrowing capacity. But really, it's about that competition. I mean, there's 23% less listings on the market right now than there were a year ago. There's very, very few vacant rentals. And what that tells us is that there's a lot of people and not a lot of homes.
It's not a good situation. Adelaide Timbrell, really appreciate you coming on the program for us this morning. Thanks.
Thanks.